Now, a report by the World Bank indicates that Nigeria's state-owned oil company, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, has remitted only 50% of the gains generated from the removal of subsidy on petrol. Now, the report launched recently stated that NNPC Limited only just started remitting revenue gains to the Federation account in January of this year, using the rest to offset past arrears. Now, the World Bank report states that for Nigeria to consolidate on gains of economic reforms, it is essential to ensure the full revenue gains from the removal of subsidy, estimated at about 2.6% of GDP in 2024, transferred to the Federation account. Well, Arise News efforts to get a reaction from NNPCL to the World Bank report were unsuccessful.
Meanwhile, oil and gas consultant Maurice Ibe joins us now for more on this story. Thank you so much for joining us on the news
tonight.
Thank you.
Nice to see you guys again.
Good to see you.
You're looking wonderful.
Thank you. So is you. Some reports put this amount at 600 billion naira in 2024, down from a 1.1 trillion naira a year before. Well, despite the figures, whatever they are, what do you make of this report from the World Bank when NNPCL is said not to remit to government coffers?
It is very troubling. The truth of the matter is that the first question is, when did subsidy actually kick in?
Right.
That's the first question. If you recall, when the president was sworn in on May 29th of 2023, he said subsidy was gone and gone forever. The government later disclosed to us that it wasn't really him that stopped subsidy, that the prior government had stopped. The last budget they made for subsidy was up to June. So, in otherwise, subsidy effectively stopped at June of 2023.
A month after the president came into office.
Now, if you also look at the fuel prices from July upwards, it automatically shot up, which means subsidy had fully kicked in. So the differentials of what we're paying when the subsidy was in and when subsidy stopped were all supposed to be part of what NNPC should be remitting to the federal government. So if subsidy had ended and NNPC was still taking in a huge sum of money from subsidy subventions, why wasn't it remitting from July, actually? We're talking about October. It should have been July to January when they started remitting. And when they actually started remitting, they are remitting 50%. So the question is, where did the rest of the money go? Knowing NNPC, they have their voodoo way of accounting within NNPC. What they would tell you is monies were spent on debts.
So settle debt arrears.
Settle debts. What are those debts? Maybe monies used to fix our refineries that have never been functional. We have 1.5 billion on Port Harcourt refinery, another 1.5 billion between Warri and Kaduna refinery.
Dollars.
With dollars, not naira. And not one single drop of fuel is coming out of those refineries. So, you know, the problem I have, it's not the World Bank report is okay. We always knew that anyway. We've been shouting about it, but nobody was listening. The question is, where did the monies go? Who is accountable to these monies? And why is the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission not going after those who superintend their refineries?
It sounds like more questions
than answers.
Yes.
And who will give the answers to this question? So now the World Bank is saying that the implications, you know, for Nigeria's oil revenue, that imagine if the NNPCL actually remitted all of, you know, the monies, that 70% of Nigeria's revenue actually comes from oil, and it would have, you know, plugged a lot of revenue shortfalls here. So what exactly are we dealing with here? That the NNPCL continues to be this opaque body?
Yes.
How did this even happen?
In fairness to the current administration, it didn't start now.
Apparently.
NNPC became a government of their own way before this government came in. In fact, at some point, as a matter of fact, monies that were supposed to be paid for crude sales were going into all manner of companies abroad. You know, but the implications of what the World Bank report basically is that if NNPC is not transparently remitting the full amount of monies due to the federal government, the government will not have the ability to fund its budget. The government will not have the ability to meet its debt obligations. They can't pay salaries. They can't meet the basic infrastructure needs of the country. So it is important that the new NNPC leadership comes to terms with the realities on the ground today and deviate from the past practices of what the previous NNPC leadership was doing. But I'm very confident the young man who has taken over right now, he's been a player in the industry for 20-something years. The CEO also, very competent gentleman. He knows NNPC and he's been around. So I'm hoping they change the narrative and bring some level of transparency, accountability, and do the right thing.
So in other words, all of this while, since subsidy was fully gone, since May 29, 2023, Nigerians have not benefited from the removal of subsidy. That was, the savings were supposed to go into infrastructure and all manner of developmental programs, including social programs. No benefit at all to Nigerians?
If you recall one of my appearances on this program, I said that the only people who have benefited from subsidy are the state governors. If you look at their FAC allocations prior to the removal of subsidy, you see the huge increase. The only people who have really actually benefited from subsidy removal are the states. And what have they done with these monies? They need to explain to Nigerians.
Great.
But if you look at the figures, you will see the quantum leap from what they were receiving prior to June of 2023 and what they were getting from July of 2023. There's a huge increase.
We have seen some state governors even openly admit that their allocations have almost tripled since the removal of subsidy. But I wanted to go back to, this whole opaqueness of NNPCL. Wasn't the PIA supposed to fix this? How is it that the NNPC is still behaving as a government-owned company that lacks transparency? Should we question the PIA?
I wouldn't question the PIA. The PIA is a document. I will question the government in power. The government has to be able to supervise NNPC. After all, we're still major stakeholders. The government has the capacity, they have the tools, they have the mechanisms to call NNPC to order. If the government, who is supposed to be the full beneficiaries of this, and they are supposed to be the ones superintending the PIA, they refuse to do their job, NNPC will continue to act as if they are laws unto themselves.
All right. Do you have an idea of how much we're talking about here that has not been remitted? I mean, you are in the industry. If you could hazard a guess of how much we're looking at that the NNPC has refused to remit, what will it be? And also, should we be looking at independent audit of the NNPC if it's not currently being done?
Absolutely, absolutely. There have been one that was done, but we haven't seen the report. NNPC, as a matter of fact, if I was the new management, the first thing I would do, at least to untie my head, in order for a full audit of NNPC. So we at least know what we're inheriting. Because if they continue to administer the same books that Mele Kyari and his group were administering, they will run into trouble at some point. Right. So if I was the leading NNPC today, I will, as the COO, order immediately an audit of NNPC so that we know what we are inheriting and where we're starting from. So I can easily and comfortably account for my own leadership, because at some point, he will have to account for his own tenure in NNPC.
Absolutely.
The other leg of the question was if you could hazard a guess to the figures we're talking about. And how damaging is this for investors' confidence? I mean, if we say NNPC is state-owned and we're trying to open our doors for people to come and invest, we've seen reports about Brazil's Petrobras trying to make a comeback. We've seen Seplat, we've seen ExxonMobil, the likes of them. And then we hear about our own state-owned company not being transparent enough. Is there any damage to reputation?
Extreme, terrible damage. Terrible. If you are an oil and gas investor who is intending to come in and invest in the country, and you see the level of corruption, the level of malfeasance within the state-owned oil corporation, why would you want to put your money in this type of situation? Tomorrow you may also be tied with the corruption that is ongoing. So, but in hazarding a guess as to what we're talking about,
figures, yeah.
NNPC, we've always had about, I think, 1.1 trillion. That's what they have naturally remitted you know, and they say they've been remitting about 600 billion from January.
Of this year, of 2025.
That's when they started remitting 600 billion. So if they are remitting 600 billion from January of this year, again, remember what I started with. What happened to the differentials between July, August, September to December?
So what you're saying is World Bank's report doesn't even go far enough.
No, it doesn't go. That's what I'm trying to say.
To include that gap. But
Not
they are
at all.
saying in their report that about 500 billion
It's more than
has not
that.
been remitted.
Way
They
more than
actually
that.
went ahead to
Way
say
more
that
than
the NNPCL is the only underscore that, underperforming revenue agency of government, and government allows that to go on and on and on,
Because
costing the
obviously
economy.
some people in the government are obviously benefiting from it. That's why maybe they're looking the other way.
So how do we get NNPCL to actually perform the way it's expected to?
We have a Minister of Petroleum who is the president.
Aha.
We have a
Should
Minister
that
of
even be
Petroleum.
in the first place?
Hey, who is the Minister of Petroleum is the president. So the buck stops on the president's desk. So if the president wants to strengthen this side, just like he dissolved and fired the entire past board of NNPC, he can put his foot down.
Okay.
He can
All
put his
right.
foot down.
Maurice, always a delight to speak with you. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you
your
so much,
insight.
Amanda.